If you're new to our channel, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Some people believe gardening or make gardening out to be so difficult, like
the main winding was the normal Lotus O deltoid type placed in panendermic semi-boloid slots of the stator.
It's real simple. Get a seed, get some soil, put the seed in the soil, water it, and it's going to grow.
Now back to the Wisconsin Vegetable Garden Radio Show with your hosts, Joey and Holly Baird.
Oh, let's go to the Ivy Organic 3-in-1 Plant Guard hotline and bring in our guest.
Joel Karsten is the inventor of the Straw Bale Garden method. He's also an author and an educator. The Straw Bale Garden books have been printed in a number of languages and sold all over the world. Welcome to the program, Joel.
Well, good morning. It's great to be with you.
Well, thank you for taking time out of your day to join Holly and myself and enlighten us as well as our listeners on the Straw Bale gardening method.
Sure.
So, let's start with this question, Joel, so we're all on the same page. I didn't know the difference between straw and hay until I met Joey, I guess. So what is the difference between hay and straw?
Well, straw is generally known as the remaining portion once a small grain or cereal grain is harvested, like oats or wheat. Then the stalk that is left over is baled up, and that's typically called straw. It's used for animal bedding. Anything that livestock would eat, so we're talking about alfalfa or grass, baled grass hay, that's typically referred to as hay. Usually, generally, if you look at them, hay is green, straw is gold or, brownish colored, where hay is always green. Hay is heavier because it has a higher moisture content usually. Straw should be a little drier, should be a little lighter. But that's basically the difference. Now, here's the big secret about straw bale gardening. You don't actually have to always use straw. You could get by with a bale of hay if that's all you could find. But generally, hay is more expensive, and it tends to decompose just a little bit faster than straw does. So if you have your choice, take straw over hay. But if you don't have a choice, you certainly can use a bale of hay.
Well, Joel, I'll ask you this question because we get asked this lots at our garden talks. We do a straw bale certification talk. People ask, where can I get organic straw? And I didn't know this was an issue because I grew up on a wheat farm. We never ever sprayed our wheat, and apparently this is a thing now that people spray wheat with chemicals that will translate over to the straw that we're trying to grow our vegetables in.
Well, it's a little bit misleading. There's a few applications of what they call cloppy rallids or amino rallids that have been discovered, especially out on the East Coast. And that's actually an off-label use of that chemical. So farmers shouldn't be doing that and then baling it up. That's the chemical that we need to be most concerned about would be cloppy rallids. Now, here's the advantage. The advantage is if you did happen to get a bale that had cloppy rallids in it, anything you seeded or tried to grow in it simply wouldn't grow. And that would mean that you'd never eat any vegetables that were contaminated with any kind of an herbicide because the bale simply wouldn't produce. But if you get a bale that has, like, for instance, glyphosate, farmers will use glyphosate as what we call a dry down in the fall to try to dry that straw up before they bale it. That has a half-life of 72 hours and evaporates very quickly. It's very volatile. And the microbes that are in the bales the following spring when we begin the straw bale gardening process and you grow bacteria in the bales, those bacteria are going to use any hydrocarbon in that bale as a source of food and quickly digest any hydrocarbons that would be left behind. So they're going to leave no trace whatsoever. We've sent in lots of studies, tests to be studied, little samples from the straw bales that we know had glyphosate sprayed on them, and there's absolutely no remnant of it remaining after about 6 weeks. It's completely gone. So.
Okay. Now, you just can't plant directly into the straw. You have to do this process called conditioning. You talk about in your book. Explain what that means.
Well, conditioning really, when people look at a straw bale garden, their first thought is, well, we're growing vegetables in straw, and we're really not. What we're growing the vegetables in is very recently decomposed straw, which is very different. We're going to spend 2 weeks actually feeding the bacteria that already exist inside of that bale. And we feed them what they like to eat, which is a source of nitrogen. This could be organic, using like blood meal, or it could be traditional, just using lawn fertilizer. And that feeding that bacteria causes them to colonize and reproduce very rapidly. They'll colonize the whole bale, and then they begin to metabolize the straw and break that straw down into the molecules that made the cells inside the straw. So now once these molecules are broken down, now you can put a new plant in there, and those molecules can now be absorbed through the roots of that new plant. So you have to go through this little biological process where we completely fill that bale with bacteria. You won't be able to see it, Holly, but you can feel it. You can put your hand in there, and you'll see that those bales get nice and warm. And that warmth is being generated from bacteria reproducing inside of that bale. It's a pretty amazing thing. And it's pretty simple biology, but it's absolutely necessary to prep that bale, to condition it. If you don't prep it ahead of time, whatever you plant in there is going to be nitrogen starved, and it's very quickly going to turn yellow and die.
Well, whenever we do the straw bale gardening correctly, we get this question, I'll address it to you. Do we have to worry about bugs or diseases like we would in traditional ground gardening?
Well, soil gardening tends to have a buildup of diseases and insect problems over the years because any spores from a disease that will harbor over winter will do so in soil. It's very easy for them to embed themselves in the soil. Same thing with larvae of insects. They'll build down into the soil, and they'll be there over the winter, and then the next spring they come back right away. The advantage we have with straw bale gardening is we're starting our own new soil inside of this bale. Now, it's really, the inside of the bale is really going to become early stage soil. But our advantage is, because this is virgin soil inside the bales, there's no soil-borne disease from last year or soil-borne insects from the previous year. So at least you get a head start in the beginning of the season without any insect or disease problems already being present inside of that bale. I'm not going to tell you that you 100% eliminate all disease and insect problems, because you don't. You still may get flying insects that will come in because they're looking, of course, for the juice from your squash vine, and etc. So you still may need to do some insect control, but the reason that people have more success with straw bale gardening is because we really encourage a trellis above the bales. Get all those vines and foliage up on that trellis, and it makes it much easier to spot insect or disease problems when they first arrive. If your cucumber vine is hanging up on this trellis, it's much easier to see the leaves on both sides of the plant when you're walking through your garden. And then when you spot a problem, you can run and get your insecticide. Could be even something as mild as soapy water, insecticidal soap or neem oil. And you bring that out there. Now, the trick with that mild insecticide is you need to get 100% coverage on that plant. So you can spray both sides of that trellis and get really good coverage, thorough coverage, which gives you a much better kill. If you're spraying vines on the ground, you only get the tops of the leaves. And it's very difficult to control them. The insects will hide out underneath the leaf while it dries on top, and then they come back up on the surface. So part of it is the cultural change of the garden.
Well,
now, people are often worried about the mice and bees, or specifically like wasps, like harmful bees, wasps, using the bale as a home. Is there anything they should be concerned about this? Or why would they be concerned about that?
Yeah, if you don't keep the bales moist, if you were to throw a straw bale out and just never water it, or even if you keep it covered up, that's a way you'll often get mice, because they're looking for a nice dry place to build a house. You got to think, if you were a mouse, what would you be looking for? I'd be looking for a nice bale of straw to build a house in. But if you arrive at that straw bale hotel and it happens to be soaking wet inside, you're not going to be inclined, even as a mouse, to build a house there, because you want to have babies and you want it to be nice and dry. And that moist, hot straw bale, gets really hot early in the spring as it begins to decompose. Is not a desirable place for them to be anyway. Especially during the summer months, there's so many other options for them to find a place to build a house. In the winter, it might be a different story. But in the spring, when you turn your water on and get those bales wet again, any mice that are in there take off. Now, bees, especially ground-dwelling bees like hornet. There's a couple types of ground hornet that will tend to build a nest in a straw bale. If you ever see a nest being built or already built, they build them very quickly in your straw bale garden. The great trick is to put a shop vac right out by the opening. Put the suck hose of your shop vac right by the entryway and turn it on just about half an hour before sunset, and come back an hour after sunset or a half hour after sunset, and all of them will be captured inside of that wet dry vac. And then just put one little squirt of wasp spray in there, and you don't have to even get close to them at that point, and they'll all be dead inside of your shop vac. So it's a real easy way to get rid of them. Most pollinators type bees are not going to be building nests inside there, so you don't need to worry about that. If you did happen to get some pollinator bees that built a nest inside there, you probably could get someone to come and move that nest for you, move that hive for you. There's a lot of people looking for rogue hives of bees that they'll come and get one and move it out of there for you.
Well, Joel, where can we find more about you, the method, the book? Where can we go and get the book at?
I'll tell you, we're pretty much everywhere, but strawbalegardens.com is our home website. It's a great place to get links to everything. So we're on Facebook and Pinterest and Instagram and Snapchat, and we're everywhere. So if you look for Straw Bale Gardening online, you're going to find it.
Well, Joel, we greatly appreciate you taking time out of your day to enlighten Holly, myself, and all of our listeners with the Straw Bale Gardening method.
Thanks for the time. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
For more information, please visit thewisconsinvegetablegardener.com.